In an inexplicable and yet totally explicable move, the Florida Democratic Party has now officially put Joe Biden on the ballot in Florida, canceling their primary and effectively making it so that there will be no democracy in the state of Florida for Democrats. Put this, please, up there on the screen. So you can see them chanting 4 more years. The thing is that they chanted it before there was ever going to be a primary. So let's put this, please, up there on the screen. I love the Politico headline here. Florida Democrats plan to cancel presidential primary, enraging Dean Phillips campaign. Not just Dean Phillips campaign, as we will show you, but—
Yeah, I love how they only mention him when he's not even the leading Democratic contender. Anyway.
Let's move past it.
Classic.
What they are doing, Nikki Fried, the chair of the Florida Democratic Party, says that the party is, quote, followed its standard process and says that it is dismayed now by Dean Phillips's conspiratorial and inappropriate comments comparing the state of Florida to an Iranian regime as part of his knee-jerk reaction to long-established procedures. This comes to the delegation selection plan that they basically sped through the Democratic convention, where through bureaucratic means, they just canceled the presidential primary completely. Here is what Dean Phillips had to say about that.
Hey everybody, what happened in Florida yesterday is a tragedy and a travesty. The Florida Democratic Party decided, just a handful of people, decided to disenfranchise millions of Democratic voters in Florida by saying we're not going to have a presidential primary. I'm running for president. There are others running for president as Democrats. And this is the kind of stuff that happens in Tehran, not in Tallahassee. We've got to do something about this. I've been a lifelong Democrat, you know that, supported our party since I was in my 20s, been a member of Congress for 3 terms, and was a member of House Democratic leadership. I've never seen something so absurd, so disenfranchising, and so suppressive of Democratic voters.
I mean, I think he's right, Krystal. And unlike Politico, we'll mention some of the other candidates who are in the race. Cenk Uygur and Marianne Williamson also sounded off. They had a press conference on the subject. Here's what they had to say.
Marianne's at 12%. She would be, what, tied with DeSantis above Nikki Haley? She would be second among the Republicans, let alone the fact that she's second among Democrats. On which planet is that not a valid candidate? It's so absurd. It's Kafkaesque. Oh, a person polling higher than almost any challenger on the Republican or Democratic side doesn't exist?
It's worth noting as well, there's one person who could put an end to all this craziness, and that's President Biden. President Biden should simply make a phone call, say this isn't right, make sure it's changed, and it would be.
Such a great point. If I was the president, I'd be like, oh, Marianne and Dean are running against me. Great, no problem. Let's hear it out.
It is hurting the Democratic Party and its chances for 2024 that they are acting this way. Cenk, Dean, and I are not hurting the Democratic chances in 2024. They are.
Yeah, I mean, she's obviously right, and all the candidates should be outraged at this, Krystal. And yet, I think this barely dented mainstream coverage over the entire week.
And the only reason it dented at all is because of Dean Phillips.
Yep.
And so that's why I'm glad he's in the race, because to have this like centrist-y member of Congress, you know, has the right credentials for the media to pay attention to and whatever, helps to elevate the just brazen, undemocratic nature of this process. And of course, it goes without saying, the irony and the hypocrisy of a Democratic Party that claims to be, quote unquote, saving democracy by literally canceling democracy in the state of Florida is quite something. And I think Cenk's comment there that it's Kafkaesque, like that's the best word you could possibly use for this, because so in the state of Florida, just to get into some of the nitty gritty of this, in the state of Florida, under state law, it's left up to the parties to decide who gets put on the ballot. Now that already to me is like, there should be some sort of like a formal process outside of the parties that, you know, you get this many signatures on the petition or whatever, like it is in many states. But there are other states that also have it in their law that basically the party decides. And in those instances in other states, they looked, okay, who's eligible? You know, some of them said, okay, Cenk, he's not, you know, he's not a natural born citizen, so he's not going to be on the ballot. But they looked at it and they just put, okay, these are the contenders. They're the ones that have filed. We're putting them on the ballot. In Florida, they really did an end run here. Dean Phillips says they were reaching out to the Florida Democrats. Okay, what's your process? How do we get on the ballot, et cetera? They were supposed to submit their list of approved candidates on, I think, last Thursday. They did it before then on November 1st and just put Biden on there, didn't give anyone a heads up about how this was all going to go down and just completely canceled the primary in the state of Florida. It's truly outrageous and exposes how hollow the Democratic Party's words about how much they care about democracy ultimately are. It's preposterous. And again, at a time when they claim Donald Trump is this, threat to democracy, which I accept after January 6th. I think that's accurate. I think he is a genuine threat to democracy and that everything's on the line and this is existential, et cetera, et cetera. But you're doing everything to guarantee that this profoundly weakened candidate in Joe Biden is the only guy that anyone has an opportunity to vote for. The other thing I was thinking about, Saagar, is Biden is way ahead. Marion's at like 12%, like Jenks said.
So who cares?
Dean Phillips is at like 8%. Jenks at like 1 or 2% in the polls that he's been put on at this point. So you got a really, really large lead here. But I think they feel that their position is precarious. And whether it is or not is hard to say. But they're looking at the polls, the fact that so many Democratic voters are very anxious about Joe Biden, how many Democratic voters are very upset with Joe Biden, how many Democratic voters really hate his policy on Israel. His policy on Israel is more popular with Republicans than it is with Democrats. And they feel a sense of vulnerability, whether that is actually real or not. And so they're worried that, somebody could catch fire in this moment and really take off and make a run at it, even though, from the outside you look at it and it seems like he's got this thing sewn up.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's so obvious. Look, they are trying to they are not trying. They are rigging it completely for Biden's benefit. In a certain sense, though, Krystal, I think that is probably a good thing because they can own the decision 100% should he eventually lose to Trump, and then maybe they will have like a total reorganization and reexamination of their priorities. Although that already did happen, and none of that ended up happening.
Right. Instead, they just blamed Bernie Sanders and Russia and whatever.
I wonder who will get the blame this time. Well, I mean, you can't blame him. You can't blame primary people this time because this time around they didn't even get to run against him for real. There was
They'll
no
blame
real
the third-party candidates.
That's true. They'll blame RFK.
RFK,
Yeah,
Jill Stein, Cornel West. That's who they'll blame this time around. This general election is going to be wild. I mean, the primaries are like very anti-democratic, and there's not much drama on the Republican side either. But the general election is going to be really wild. If you have RFK, if you've got Cornell, Jill Stein, Joe Manchin, or whoever, this is going to be a different landscape, I think, than we've ever seen before. And it could be, it could be kind of total chaos in terms of who actually comes out on top and whether anyone's able to get 270 electoral votes. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, we've been reading about contingent elections here to prepare, if anybody's interested. Go ahead and Google that term before we tell you all about it.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.